Hi, I'm Chris McPhee, and I'd like to welcome you here to the Capri Theatre. The story of this instrument dates back to the year 1974, which just happens to be the year that I was born. At that time, the Theatre Organ Society in South Australia purchased what was to become the core of this instrument. I'd like you all now to sit back and enjoy the first part as we see how TOSA's pipe dream began to come true.
In the 1960s in Sydney, organist Pen Hughes had a theatre organ installed in his house at Bexley. During its life it was played by many notable organists, including the American Lynn Larson. The console had originally been the second or slave console in the State Theatre Melbourne, and when it was removed it was stripped back to wood, acquired by Pen Hughes and used in his home with pipework from various organs he'd previously bought. Before he attached that 4-manual Wurlitzer console, a 2-manual Christie console had been controlling his organ. The organ was later sold to Mike Fitzner in Darwin, and although installed in his home, it was never playable. In early 1974, the Theatre Organist Society of Australia, South Australian division known as TOSA, purchased the organ from Mike Fitzner at a cost of $6,600. In November 1974, a team of 6 TOSA members flew to Darwin to dismantle and pack the organ to be brought to Adelaide for restoration and installation in an as-yet unknown venue. Led by a vice president at the time, Ted Lloyd, the team spent 5 days hard at work removing the organ. Another TOSA member living in Darwin at the time, who'd been helping with the installation in Mike's home, was also on hand to help. With high temperatures, humidity and hard work, tempers could have frayed, but with a faithful camera on hand, the solution consisted of just fading the boss away while fiddling at the console. Due to council regulations, all the organ parts had to be taken to a temporary area where the removal van could be parked. This meant double handling of everything. The largest and smallest pipes were shown off during packing one afternoon. With only the console to pack, a short ceremony was held to present Mike and Val Fitzner with a cheque to complete payment for the organ. It was quite formal, but it could have been different. With final photos taken with the old and the new owners, the team soon got to it and finished their job. On December the 3rd, 1974, the Pantechnicon arrived in Adelaide and was backed into the driveway at Spicer Memorial Church at St Peter's. A room was to be used to store the organ during restoration. However, no one realised the stay at Spicer was to become over 8 years. An enthusiastic group of members was on hand for the unpacking, and very soon the organ had been moved into its new temporary home. Early in 1975, TOSA president at the time, Malcolm Patterson, was interviewed at Spicer about the organ and the Society's intentions.
Well, it's a fairly lengthy story, but in brief, I was living in Darwin a few years ago, and a local man up there bought this particular organ from a fellow in Sydney. And his name was Pen Hughes in Sydney, who'd been a theatre organist in Adelaide. Well, Mike Fitzner of Darwin bought the organ and literally stuffed it into a double-decker bus that he bought in Sydney and drove it cross-country to Darwin, where he had reorganised his house and put most of it underneath. And as the years went on, unfortunately, it became obvious that the humidity in Darwin and various flooding, various things that had occurred to the organ, that he would have to sell it. So as the president of the Theatre Organ Society, I approached him when he came to Adelaide one day and said, "Will you?" And after much thinking and sadness, he said yes. So we sent a team of chaps up to Darwin, and fortunately, just before Cyclone Tracy hit Darwin on Christmas Day, we'd had the organ taken out in a removalist van, and it was on its way down to Adelaide. And what was left of his house were the organ chambers that all of this was in, and they sheltered in those empty organ chambers and were saved from quite a lot of worry during the cyclone.
Well, now that you've got all the bits and pieces, what are you going to do with them?
Well, we have to restore the organ because it's had a certain amount of water damage and a certain amount of just old age damage to it. So we're going to start rebuilding it right from scratch.
You're going to need a lot of money and a lot of help to put it together?
Not necessarily a lot of money. We can do it over a period of about 3 years. It'll be a few $1,000s, yes, but not a great amount of money. If we do it by ourselves, it won't cost a great deal of money. If we have to employ a great deal of professional help from an organ company, which we've used before, it will obviously cost us more. But hopefully it won't put us back too far. Once we get to that stage, we then have to put it into a hall or a cinema or a theatre or something like that.
Seriously meant, but to turn out to be the understatement of TOSA history. And so it was in late 1978 that TOSA purchased, for $145,000, the Capri Theatre, Goodwood, as a home for the organ and club headquarters. Built and opened in 1941 as the new Goodwood Star Theatre, the interior design, in keeping with the exterior, was very moderne, or Art Deco. In 1967, the theatre was renamed the Capri by owners Clifford Theatres and reopened with the old proscenium out of view and with a new widescreen built in front of it. The original proscenium consisted of 3 plaster shells with concealed coloured neon lighting. However, the TOSA purchase meant the sides of the proscenium, out of sight behind the screen and curtains, had to go. Early '79 saw it being demolished to make way for organ chambers. Carried out mainly on Sunday mornings, it could at times be dangerous work, both for those in the ceiling and those on the floor, who had to make sure they weren't in the wrong place at the wrong time for fear of being demolished by the proscenium being demolished. Old storerooms at the bottom of the proscenium also had to be removed, but that was much easier and therefore faster to achieve. It wasn't long before chambers could be started, although it was to be over 2 years before this actually happened. Delays in chamber construction proved the major time waster for the project. With the size and shape of the chambers to work on, a main chamber layout was set up at Spicer, and the bulk of this layout's been kept in the finished chambers. It was decided to replace the original mechanical switch stacks, which we didn't have enough of anyway, with modern electronic switching. Each of these large switches was replaced with one of these cards. Many facets of the organ were in progress at Spicer, from the console to this 6-rank chest, completely re-leathered and only needing the underboard screwed on to be completed at that time. The console had been fitted with all new stop units, and new sections were made to accommodate extra tabs that had been included in a new specification for 21 ranks. On July the 9th, 1981, the builders finally moved into the Capri and began digging the foundations for the organ chambers. It had taken 2.5 years to get to this stage, due to delays in agreement on chamber plans, controversy on certain materials to use for the actual chambers, building regulations, approvals, price differences in quotes, and other factors. It was a welcome sight to see it happening at last. Soon after, the cement floor was laid on the left or main chamber side, and the next few months saw these unique chambers grow. With the foundations down, the first level of bricks could be laid. This room was to become a major work area for the installation. Metal reinforcing was then placed on top of this brickwork and cement poured to make the subchamber floor. From here, the remainder of the brickwork was erected, forming the main chamber blower room and subchamber door. The framework for the plasterboard wall was then put up, in preparation for the last major part of construction at this stage. With plasterboard in place, the chamber had to be painted black and the front wall finished. During construction, the auditorium was in various stages of disorganisation. Sometimes the curtain motors were unable to be connected, and so the screen was in view all the time. At other times, temporary curtains partly covered the scaffolding protruding on either side. Near the end of construction, which was completed just before Christmas 1981, both chambers could be seen to be almost finished. Looking across to the main chamber, the original side wall, soon to be painted black, could be seen. Viewed from the main chamber, the auditorium took on quite a different perspective. Having made drastic changes to the front of the auditorium, it was decided to replace the red curtains with new gold ones. These were designed to be used normally for films and opened wider to show off the chambers for concerts. This meant a new balustrade across the front to finish off the auditorium view. Although the chambers were ready and installation could begin, it was to be a few months into 1982 before this happened, due to delays in getting the back area wired for power. During the middle of '82, the console was taken to the Capri for painting. Worked on during the show in the back rooms, the aim was to put the console on display in the foyer. Gold decoration on the console was also painted at this time. By now, some of the organ had been moved to the chambers and the blowers placed in their rooms, but as can be seen, the main chamber floor had not yet been started. Some string and diaphone pipes had been hung on the wall, but mainly to get them out of the way. At the end of July, the console was moved and assembled in the foyer for members and the public to see what was happening down at the Capri. The console certainly looked impressive, but a lot of work had to be done before it was finished. Shortly after, the task of cabling all the stop tab units was begun. This was done in the candy bar, mainly during and after shows, leaving the console looking a little bare. Most cables have been plug-ended for easily dismantling of sections. Every tab and tab unit on the organ is new, with reed switches being used for reliability. The console is all electric, making wind trunking to it unnecessary. By December 1982, the main chamber floor was in, and it was now necessary to paint the ceiling of the sub-chambers. The top surface would be painted shortly, but here it was still bare particle board. The main was starting to take shape, but the solo still left a lot to be desired. Out at Spicer, the restoration crew had been busy building new shutters and frames. 3 frames, each holding 8 shutters, were required for each chamber. The shutters themselves consist of aluminium frames filled with polystyrene foam. The completed frames were first filled with scrap foam pieces, a 2-part solution mixed, then quickly poured into the prepared frames. The ends were then quickly stoppered and clamped. The clamping was necessary because the foam solution's volume increases dramatically to fill the shutter interior, as you can see from this small sample. Adhesive rubber strips were then put down one edge to prevent the shutters from banging, although felt has since replaced the rubber. The other parts required for the shutters, and built by the team, were pneumatic motors for operating them. The final stage for the shutters was to transport them from Spicer to the Capri, where they were lifted up to position at ceiling height, one frame at a time. Extra bits and pieces were usually taken to the theatre at the same time, as, being the end of January 1983, time was already running out if the inaugural concert was to be held at the TOSA National Easter Convention on April the 2nd. Once inside the theatre, each frame was moved into position at floor level and then hoisted up to its final position at ceiling height. Bolting them to the wall ensured they'd stay where they were put. Also around this time, the chambers were taking shape, the main wind trunking having been completed in the main subchamber. The solo was still being worked on in this regard, and second coats of paint were being done forever, it seemed. It was felt the project should be sped up, and so it was. On the 17th of February, the glass panels for the chamber and subchamber windows arrived and were installed over a period of 2.5 days. Some of the glass sheets, 10 millimetres or just under half an inch thick, weighed almost 1/4 of a tonne. Needless to say, it was an awkward job, well and truly left to the experts. All went well and the construction of the chambers was now finished, about 14 months after the rest. The restoration team had a calendar going, and it soon showed up the word no one wanted to see. With the 2nd of April in mind, 3 days later on the 19th of March 1983, the console was moved from the Capri foyer to the auditorium. It was decided to move it in one piece, so the console went for its last journey both on wheels and in the outside air. Out the side door and down the street with a few onlookers wondering what on earth was going on. The journey went smoothly, and it wasn't long before the console re-entered the theatre in its last manoeuvres to its final resting position. For a while, anyway. Its teeth were replaced, complete with new preset rails, and soon the console took on its completed form. It was the first time it had been together as a finished console, as the keys had been out for a couple of months. With eager anticipation, the console was given a quick dusting and clean-up so that lighting could be looked at in its new home. The console looked magnificent and set the auditorium off beautifully. With just 2 weeks to go before the inaugural concert, TOSA South Australia thought it was about to see its unique project come to fruition and see its pipe dream come true. Little did they know this was just the beginning.
That part really was interesting, but there certainly was a lot of work to do before the organ opened at the 1983 convention. At that time I didn't even know what a theatre organ was, but nowadays I certainly do, being privileged to play for both film sessions and concerts here at the theatre. Now we're going to have a short commercial, and after that I'd like to play you a song before we take a look and see what happened at the organ's opening some 2 weeks later.
Everybody's nuts.
I'd now like to play you a piece which shows you the lush sounds of this organ, and I've chosen a piece from Showboat called Make Believe. Straight after this piece we're going to launch into part 2 of our story.
On April 2nd, 1983, amid much fanfare and an expectant crowd of theatre organ enthusiasts from around Australia and New Zealand, the Capri's four-manual theatre organ was presented publicly for the first time. It was the main concert at the TOSA National Easter Convention that year. Three of Australia's leading theatre organists, John Atwell, Tony Fenelon and Ray Thornley, played this milestone concert. The lead up to the concert had not been without its problems. The console, having only been moved into the auditorium 2 weeks earlier, still had wiring and circuitry not working the day before the concert. On the morning of Friday the 1st of April, some would remind us April Fool's Day, the organ simply wasn't playing. By evening, 3 ranks were working from the console. No one dared go home. Slowly, overnight, the rank count grew to 13. For the first time since the 1960s in Penn Hughes' home in Sydney, the organ was finally speaking again. There were still many problems. Ciphers, those little stuck notes. Tuning to be done for an opening concert that evening. 3 organists needing to practice, and an organ crew that had been working for more than 24 hours. Tension was high. Rumours spread round the convention ears the organ would not play, and one organist refused to play, but later changed his mind. An electronic organ was brought in, just in case. By late afternoon, the organ was tuned, and despite problems, John Atwell managed to play a little, the only organist to get any practice at all. The time finally came, and to a packed house, mostly oblivious to the dramas behind the scenes, yours truly had the privilege of announcing the arrival of the Capri organ.
It's not me I want you to applaud tonight. It's our 3 remarkable soloists we're going to have. You all know why we're here. We're here because the Theatre Organ Society for years has been striving to get its own theatre, get its own theatre organ, and we've been working on that theatre organ for years. But do you know, she has been the most reluctant bride ever. Half of her is undressed. The other half, well, we hope that it'll all not fall off her. And she spits and she sparks and she's done all sorts of things. But tonight, the marriage will be consummated. I must say that all of the workers who've been working on the organ, a lot of them in the theatre tonight, have been here 24 hours non-stop, no sleep, no nothing, to make sure that it works tonight. I might also say that we still have some problems, but I know that with Tony and John and Ray, you won't notice them, only they will. Ladies and gentlemen, one other thing I would like to say tonight, because the organ isn't as good as we would like it, I think it'll be as good as you'll like it, but we're fussy, we demand that there be no tape recorders used at all. If you've brought a tape recorder, please do not, repeat, not use it tonight. Just fantastic work has gone into this organ. You'll hear it, you'll see it, and ladies and gentlemen, first of all, let us see the console. Welcome to the inaugural concert of the Theatre Organ Society organ at the Capri Theatre.
It was an emotional moment for many people, and a stressful time for the three musicians. As Tony Fenelon said after his first solo number,
"Thank you very much indeed." Well, the old girl certainly, she's a bit reluctant, as Malcolm said, but nevertheless, she's here, and she can't get out because all the doors are barred. You may hear some odd little sounds from time to time, but you're hearing it the same time as I am, I guess, because I think we're all going to enjoy it for the first time tonight. You when you listen to it, and we when we play it, because I think this is about the first time we've really, all three of us, been able to play a piece right the way through because of the work that's been involved, and really, to have an organ finished.
There were not even any presets available at the first concert, and no one really knew what anything sounded like or how it would blend with other stops. Adding to this, the heat from the bright lights in the glass chambers caused some of the electronics to play up during the concert, and the tuning, well, it became worse and worse as the chamber temperature increased well above normal. Tony and John and Ray did a marvellous job under less than ideal conditions, and most people remember the debut as a huge success, despite any problems. The following weekend, the organ began to be used regularly at the Capri for film sessions. If you visit the Capri often, you'll notice things don't remain static for very long, for the Theatre Organ Society in South Australia is a very active society, and the Capri is an ongoing enterprise. Over the next 13 years there were many things happening around the Capri to both improve and expand the organ, and of course to upgrade the Capri for both cinema use and organ presentation. A local group offered to paint a mural along the side of the theatre. This of course was accepted eagerly. New ranks of pipes were purchased, plus a piston system was added to the console. In late 1984, a vice president at the time, Wayne Bertram, conceived the idea of recording a multi-artist record on the unfinished organ. The idea was to raise money to help complete it. Australia's top 5 theatre organists, Tony Fenelon, John Atwell, David Johnston, Ray Thornley and Neil Jensen, readily agreed to donate their time and talents. Between February and April 1985, each organist came to the Capri and recorded their respective pieces for the album Five Alive. It was released in July 1985 at a Tony Fenelon concert and was a huge success, with rave reviews within Australia and overseas. This milestone recording also boasted several firsts. It was the first commercial recording on the Capri organ, it was the first and only recording of Australia's top theatre organists altogether, and it was the first theatre organ recording in Australia to be digitally recorded. With this record, the Capri began to take its place on the international theatre organ map. To set the record straight, this photo, which was on the back cover of the recording, was only a clever fake. all 5 organists have never been at the Capri at the one time. There's no faking in the music though, it was Australian theatre organ at its best. In 1986, the stage was extended and a tunnel constructed beneath it to a new organ console pit, complete with lift. Construction proceeded at a rapid rate daytime, while at night, film sessions continued with the organ console played from various positions. On Sunday, October the 12th, the lift came into operation, adding a whole new dimension to organ presentation at the Capri. For the first time in South Australia, contrary to popular belief, a theatre organ console was now able to rise up from the depths to stage level. Also in 1986, the smash hit Australian film Crocodile Dundee was released, and by good fortune, the Capri was able to run this film as a first release. In its first week, the Capri broke the record for takings in an Adelaide suburban theatre, and with capacity crowds, hundreds were turned away session after session. Played every night during this time, thousands of people heard the Capri organ. The huge Crocodile Dundee crowd saw the rapid deterioration of the theatre's ageing seats, so a process of recovering and restoring these seats commenced. A companion for the organ arrived in December. The TOSA Ladies Auxiliary had raised funds to provide a grand piano to be used for concerts and club nights. It was a very welcome addition. The next major activity occurred when scaffolding surrounded the theatre exterior in March 1987. The bland white covering from the 60s disappeared as the Capri was repainted to its original colour scheme. At the same time, volunteers set to work to revitalise and finish the sidewall mural. The newly painted exterior looked stunning. The Capri was really becoming one of Adelaide's premier showcases. It already boasted the second largest seating capacity of any cinema in Adelaide. The other major event of importance was the first anniversary of Crocodile Dundee at the Capri. Its unprecedented success allowed TOSA to pay off the theatre more than 10 years earlier than expected. A freehold party club night was held in September 1988 to celebrate. TOSA patron Tony Fenelon was invited to join local organists for the festivities of the occasion. Gaining freehold title to the Capri Theatre marked another milestone in TOSA South Australia's dream, but it didn't mean that all the bills had been paid. There was still much to be spent on the organ and the theatre. A string of good films allowed the successful operation of the Capri to continue. There were some colourful, if not strange, moments during these days. Some unusual guests rose into the view with the organ console for the Rocky Horror Picture Show. The organ always remained an important priority since it was the reason for buying the Capri in the first place. In March '89, another leap forward was taken for the organ with the purchase and installation of a state-of-the-art Devtronics multi-action organ computer control system. The original, locally built electronics used to get the organ up and running 6 years earlier was removed, leaving the console somewhat empty. The console cabling was reconnected to the new system, while a team of people worked on the mammoth task of rewiring the pipework in the chambers. A huge amount of work was carried out after hours and on weekends, allowing the Devtronics to be installed and running flawlessly in just 10 weeks. The Devtronics opened up a new era of reliability and versatility for the Capri organ. It was now possible for every organist to have their own set of pistons. Another great improvement was for recording. The Devtronics has the ability to capture all playing at the console to a computer floppy disk, and then be able to play back the organ live at a later date. A bit like a pianola on steroids, if you like. Between each stage of development on the organ and the Capri, club activities continued to expand and flourish. An innovation was the formation of a junior organists group who once a year prepare and present their own club night for members to enjoy. As well, a young organist is featured at all other club nights during the year. In March 1988, an exceptionally talented young 14-year-old by the name of Chris McPhee happened to come along to the Capri for the first time. Chris immediately fell in love with the organ and progressed in leaps and bounds. Club nights have provided the means for many of the various traditions of the theatre organ to be fostered, including the old-time sing-along, especially popular at Christmas time. As well as being featured as a solo instrument, the organ has played an accompanying role with everything from dance items, singers, instrumentalists, bands and large choirs. One of the main reasons theatre organs came into existence was to provide music for the silent films. Club nights and some concerts offer that opportunity for the public to experience this unique art form. David Johnston of Melbourne is one of the world's finest proponents of this skill and is playing for your enjoyment as you watch this video. One major role of the organ has been to showcase the wide variety that exists in the different theatre organ playing styles. Since that inaugural concert, a cavalcade of local, interstate and overseas artists have played at the Capri, showing off theatre organ music at its finest. Behind the scenes, there's always been something happening at the Capri. In 1990, the theatre was listed on the Register of State Heritage Buildings. Restoration of the auditorium walls commenced mid-91, and with that heritage listing in mind, much attention was given to detail. By scraping back through the layers of paint, the original colours were revealed, and the walls were repainted to this colour scheme. Special lighting bays were constructed to match the architectural treatment of the auditorium. Once painted, they blended into the scheme of things remarkably well. In October 1991, experienced theatre organ experts from America, Walter Stroney, organist, and Ed Zollman, technician, were engaged to take the Capri organ one stage further in its development. Massive rewinding was done to overcome air instability and tremulant problems that had plagued the organ. Tonal balancing and regulation enabled the organ's ensemble of pipes to blend much better, but time ran out for the Americans as the organ moved closer to becoming a world-class instrument. After leaving, they submitted a list of recommendations to change some ranks, add more, and re-specify the console before a return visit to complete the tonal work. This was approved in December 1991, and the search began for the required ranks and other parts. This work on the organ coincided with another very special occasion for the theatre. On October the 8th, 1991, the Capri celebrated its 50th birthday, celebrated in true Hollywood style with invited dignitaries arriving by vintage car. An exciting lineup of stage and screen entertainment awaited the guests, who filled the theatre to relive part of the era of 50 years earlier. Of course, in 1941 there was no mighty theatre organ in the new Goodwood Star, as it was known then. After the entertainment, a large decorated birthday cake was cut by TOSA President Anthony Taylor and Capri General Manager Lloyd Rover. A special limited edition book was released, commemorating the Capri's 50th birthday, TOSA SA's 25th birthday, and the Society's 212 Wurlitzer's 21st birthday. All of these events coincided in 1991. Titled Thanks for the Memory, the book is the definitive history of TOSA's activities up to then. In November of 1991, the South Australian Film Corporation used the Capri for the premiere of a newly restored Australian silent movie, The Woman Suffers. This time, however, the Adelaide Chamber Orchestra provided the accompaniment for the film. This was probably the first time an orchestra had accompanied a silent film in Adelaide for over 60 years, and it happened at the Capri. Another first in 91 was the release of All I Want for Christmas, Australia's first fully digitally recorded theatre organ CD. Recorded by David Johnston, 21 ranks were in operation for this recording. In '92, the ceiling of the Capri was restored and the neon lighting upgraded. In January '93, on his 20th birthday, Chris McPhee recorded his debut CD on the Capri organ. In 1993, he was also the senior and overall winner of the American Young Theatre Organist competition. Soon he was jetting off to play concerts in the States. Chris became our best ambassador. During 1993, newly purchased ranks were added to the organ to complement those already there, making it the largest theatre organ in the Southern Hemisphere. The only theatre organ that will be larger, when fully going, will be the new Regent Melbourne organ. In November 1993, another event from a past era took place at the Capri, Rex's Quiz, a radio quiz show broadcast live with the organ, staged by ABC Radio with a live audience. 95 saw much activity on the Capri organ. In February, 2 CDs were recorded by Tony Fenelon and John Atwell. At that stage, the organ had 25 ranks. These 2 CDs were recorded for an upcoming concert tour of the United States and helped spread the sounds of the Capri to more and more theatre organ enthusiasts. There was also a lot of work put in by local organ builder George Stevens in preparation for the return visit of Walter Stroney and Ed Zolman. Since their initial visit in 1991, all recommendations, including a new console specification, had been adopted. The final major work in the organ's history in Adelaide was set to take place in November 1995. Walter spent many days at the console, with Ed in the chambers, balancing notes within ranks and tonally adjusting ranks to blend with each other. On December the 3rd, 1995, the Capri organ finally came of age. Under the master touch of one of the world's top theatre organists, Walter Stroney, the hard work of many years finally came to fruition. The final rank count was 29 and every tap worked as marked. As it turned out, it was 21 years to the day since the organ had arrived in the van from Darwin. After all these years, it could at last be said that TOSA in South Australia had indeed had its pipe dream come true. The story doesn't stop there, however. Walter recorded the first CD on the newly completed organ before returning home, and this was released in 1996. More recordings are underway in 97, and there's still more work to be done. The computer system controlling the organ's been upgraded to a new IBM PC-based system called the Uniflex 2000, allowing even more versatility. Also in 1997, another young Capri organist, Ryan Heggie, won the intermediate section of the American Theatre Organ Society's Young Organist competition. Flown to the States for their annual convention, he then took out the prize as overall winner. And so, through the devotion and efforts of a group of enthusiastic music lovers, the sights and sounds of the mighty theatre organ are excitingly recaptured at the Capri for generations to come.
Thank you for joining me in this historic look at how the Capri organ came about. I'd like to finish now with a couple of numbers, first being At the Codfish Ball, made famous by Shirley Temple, and then I'd like to take the organ down with a march.